itself sort of encompasses all of that, where we are proposing, which is based on the evidence that we've accumulated through the Wood Green Voices exercise, that we are in this document putting out 6 themes for improvement and 5 sort of placemaking areas for the Wood Green area. So it's what we're asking for tonight is for approval from the Cabinet of the document.
Are there any questions from the Cabinet?
Yeah, I've got to agree with this because it's all about moving green and making wood green. It's a laudable ambition, obviously, and it's something that I think in the residents' feedback was a major priority. I guess on that, it talks about making replacement more trees, property parks, planters, green walls, etc. And you put the placemaking areas, there's the cultural quarter, local science station, roadside, civic centre, Trumpton, Temple Lane, there's that whole area. I'm just wondering, because there's obviously this is that first sort of document. Just wondering if there was anything on this that sort of links with other plans that are obviously in train at the moment, where we can say people will start seeing a focus on some of those areas. Are there priority areas? I guess is the question. Time-wise.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, what's in the document comes out of the evidence that we heard from the residents when we did the Wood Green Voices sort of exercise, if you like, which was much more extensive than we've ever done before, and that's why I think it's successful. So there's things that people said about Wood Green that they really, really liked. There's things that they said about Wood Green that they didn't like and therefore needed improvement. It doesn't mean to say that everything stops while we sort of think about this and, go away and sort of start from scratch. There are obviously projects that are ongoing that have been in train that fit into the overall strategy that we've got in anyways. So there's a whole number of projects that are ongoing, and they will absolutely fit into the strategy that we've got in the document. So yeah, nothing stops, and there's lots of things that we have. Want to list them all right now, unless you really impressed me, but there's a huge number of projects, whether that is on Wood Green Common or, on whether what we do in Lucas Common, for example, and what we've done with the Youth Hub and what we've done in Linton Avenue. So there's lots of things that are going on, but we sort of think will fit into the strategy. Nothing stopping. It's just that we wanted this overall document so that we can refer back to it to say that when, as projects emerge, that they have these principles lying behind them.
And that is essentially, this is sort of the Harrogate deal side of that whole regeneration. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think this is sort of where we try to implement the ethos behind the Harrogate deal. So, we've had, I mean, you can get a bit sort of blasé about engagement, but we feel that in this we've sort of gone to, unheard voices previously. We translated all the materials into several languages, 5 or 6 languages. We spoke to people from very young primary school to old people, to services, to the voluntary sector, to businesses. So we really tried to sort of broaden that scope of opinion, and we think we did it in quite a nimble fashion. So we weren't sort of taking forever, and we didn't want to sort of come back and say to us, oh, well, you've asked us all this before, and it just feels like, you're constantly asking us what it is that you want to improve. And we sort of felt that we did it really quickly. We pulled together those ideas, and this is what's come out of the strategy document. So when we've come to hone that down into these sort of groups, if you like, and out of that there will be projects that will emerge in line with that. Simply. But yeah, Harrogate deal all over it.
So any more questions from the Cabinet?
Thank you, councillor Ahmed. Do you want questions? I've got 3 on this item. Do you want one in one go?
Yeah, do.
Okay. So first is how are you planning to form the membership of the groups which will work with the council? Changing culture in any organisation is easier said than done. So one example, we were told by the council that we can't plant fruit trees at our community garden, as if someone has an allergy and picks the fruit and eats it, we could be liable. So how will you change the sort of attitudes where the council finds a reason to say no rather than yes, which is outlined in the report? And there's a theme in the report that people think Wood Green is dirty. Are you planning to increase the amount of street cleaning imminently?
Sorry, just the first question was on, oh, I beg your pardon. The first question was on the membership of Wood Green Voices going forward. Is that right? So, yeah, what you said.
Yeah, the participatory groups which will continue that.
So what we've done so far is we've already sort of had a report back session. So we had the initial discussions with as many different groups and interest groups that we could think of, and sort of ratting the other hands for finding as many different organisations that we talk to. It's not a closed list though. So we've had one report back session. We think that there should be regular forums of residents and stakeholder groups that we are happy to expand. There's no sort of closed membership as it were. And the as new groups come along, and they, we will be constantly sort of renewing that and expanding it as we go. And we see then as having, sort of, like town centre wide forums that will act as a sort of sounding board for us, so that we can test out and sense check everything that we're doing on a sort of regular basis. To change the culture in an organisation, I mean, I didn't sort of accept the total of your premise that you were making out that we weren't listening before and so on. I suppose what we're saying is that we want to make sure that we are listening, and that idea of going back constantly to people to say, this is what you've told us, are we on the right track as part of that, that change, that we're not doing things on behalf of people in that sense. We are doing what people want us to do, and that participatory thing is going to happen ongoing. I can't remember what the third question is. Sorry, Nancy.
Right, just on that last one, it was more about whether the council find more reasons to say yes instead. Sort of, it says no, and there are reasons behind that, which I kind of outlined that you can't plant fruit trees if someone has an allergy and gets approved. And it happens in all councils. It's not a direct criticism of your council. And then it was lots of people said in the report that they think Wood Green is dirty. Are you planning to increase the amount of street cleaning?
Well, I might ask for us to come back on the street cleaning routine on that one. And in terms of the, I don't know, I haven't got a specific answer about allergies and so on. I don't think it is us, always saying no. But I do think that what we've done in this process has been really clear about where although we are, in a sense, ceding some power from the council, saying, well, the decision makers, there are certain instances where the council itself, constitutionally has to be the decision maker. And I think that's really important to make sure that people understand where those different boundaries lie, and there's certain things where we have to make the decision. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to add on that, but on street cleaning, you have to.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Actually, our head of waste attended every single Wood Green Voices meeting, and has also attended the last meeting last week. There's a few things that we are doing specifically for Wood Green. Firstly, I would like to say that Wood Green actually has the highest rate of street sweeping because it's on a constant beat, so you will always see a street on the Green Line Road, and they're there all the time, because you can't get any higher than that. However, there is a lot of other work that we need to do. So, as part of the Green Voicing project, some of the stuff we've really started is that we've had a whole array of pavement cleaning. We've been doing that with Woodbury Mix, and we've also I'm going to be introducing a whole range of granular bins, and they are much posher than any other bins that you're going to find on your side of the borough. But they're really, really cute, and they're double jaw as well. So they've got ashtrays, and they've got I don't know if you've seen, but we've put up gumballs. So we're doing quite a lot of work as a result of what we're doing already. And that there are things to continue. So it's not just about increasing our kind of sweeping or whatever it is we need to do. We need to kind of increase English. So I'll make sure that all the facilities are there. So that's what we're currently doing as well.
Sorry, I've just been reminded that in fact we are planting fruit trees. As you said that. Yeah, but we're praying on the allergy front.
Which fruit? Councillor Joe Lee.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to speak because the current member touched on it before, but I think it was want to be a bit more positive. Some questions. I just want to say thanks to Councillor Gordon to Greg and all those who've been involved in it. I know from conversations I've had with traders and business, which let's not forget is the economic hub of our borough who have felt there was a really meaningful engagement, and that's good. And we build on that, and they reflect very much the leaders' approach to really meaningful engagement with our community. So, there's always lessons learned, but this has been a good example of proper and real engagement, and I look forward to seeing what we're in the period ahead.
I'm here to that. I've got in a few of the sessions, and I think we're really trying to do something different here. No more questions. If we could move to the resolution, just to approve the recommendation, it sets out at page. Are we all in agreement? Okay, that's really 10, which is the strategic asset management and property.
Thank you, Jane. So, first of all, let me apologise for the boring title. But I think it's much more interesting than the title suggests. The good thing about the title is it sounds like Sanskrit, but it's not. It's SAMPIP, a strategic asset management plan and property improvement plan, all rolled into one. Just to be serious about it, the council controls a huge portfolio of assets. And I suppose this document first of all sets out, establishes really, well, why would we want to do that, and to make sure that we have got the correct reasons for having that extensive portfolio of assets. And obviously the primary function of our assets is to make sure that we can deliver services in the best way possible for the residents of our borough. So this document in essence sets out that primary function, but it also goes on to say that that will be within the strategic need to put that within the corporate delivery plan, but also within the financial framework. So it isn't that we're just holding assets in some speculative way, but that we're actually managing those assets in a way that is prudent and beneficial to residents overall. So we've always got those two things. Can we deliver the services, and what is the best way in which we can deliver the services using the assets, the physical assets that we've got in the council, and can we do that within the financial framework that is set out, that we are acting prudently and making good use of council taxpayers' money. So that was the purpose behind setting out what strategic objectives are that you can see in that on page 109, I think it is, 4.4. And out of those strategic objectives, we've got a set of action plans within the council. It also sets out a way in which we will be managing the assets and in more sort of centralised focus, so that there is absolute control and a robust and transparent process for the management of those assets. I think it's fair to say that we've learned some lessons, and you can see that in other reports that we've had, and whether those have gone to the corporate committee and the report that we've had through the external investigation into property transactions. And we want to make sure that what we do going forward takes all of those lessons into account, and that we've got a transparent and robust process going forward. And I'd certainly say that I've got confidence now in the team that we've got that are managing that portfolio, and we have absolutely transformed the way in the last couple of years. We have transformed the structure within the council of that team, and I feel hugely confident now that we've got the right skills in place and the right management of that team that can take us forward, so that we can see a huge improvement the way that we have been doing things. But I think it's a good strategic overview, and I think it will help us to achieve the objectives, and obviously the primary one, can deliver the services in the most efficient way possible. I'll leave my opening remarks there, Chair, and any questions.
And then just to say, the next item on the agenda is the external review. But we'll get to that. But if you have any questions, please, Councillor Jenkins.
Thanks, Kathleen and Councillor. This is very interesting. I mean, that's genuinely just a quick question on a more macro level. What impact has the wider economic picture will have on following others program? And I'm thinking of rising energy costs, bad decision taken by Tory ministers, which I suspect the council partners would agree with me on. So just interested to see how that's been factored in.
Well, I must ask the Assistant Director to come in on more detail, but certainly there is legislation that we've got to take into account in all of our buildings, like EPC ratings, and making sure that our buildings fulfil our ambitions on the sustainable agenda and the carbon agenda that we've got. So, yeah, there is a huge amount of work to do, which is why I think we need this sort of structure in place and that centralised control over the whole portfolio. I don't know if Assistant Director would add to that.
So, Jonathan Gates, Director for Council Projects and Property. Essentially, the toolkit within the strategy is a live document, a live process that we constantly update and review. The man who's head of assets, team will be looking after that. So where we do see changes in energy prices, where we do see changes in construction market costs, any other operational costs that exist, we'll constantly be looking at updating those. As Councillor Gordon said, working very much with the services, make sure it's still delivering what we're looking at in terms of that. That allows us to be more data driven.
Any more questions, Councillor Patterson?
Yeah, thank you for the report. Obviously, property plays an enormous role in everything that we're doing, and I think it's essential that it's our own council property assets are valued at 2.8 billion. Something to that, so that's a huge responsibility in terms of how we manage it. So I'm really welcome this report, absolutely. It's part of there's a whole number of property related reports in this. And there was a clarification which was just on the governance and decision making toolkit in the assembly, which was really, was that part of the asset management plan, which this now supersedes. So did that exist before, and we just upgraded it, or is this a new addition to where you manage assets? So that's the governance and decision making toolkit. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I think what we've done is we've really developed that toolkit because you can, as you said, it's a huge portfolio and really, crucial to the council that we've got that governance that is in place and it is transparent and robust, as I said. So this is a way of moving forward to make sure that all of those decisions are taken in a very objective way, no matter whether that is about a community centre or a parks building or whatever it is that's coming forward, that it's assessed objectively about what the purpose is of holding that asset and what needs to be spent on that asset in terms of developing it and fit the purpose. And so all of that goes through this sort of what we call a sausage machine of the decision-making process so that we can understand it's going to go through that process. So again, maybe if I ask Jonathan to supplement the remarks about how it's changed from previous strategic asset management plan to be this more all-encompassing strategy document.
Thank you. So the previous asset strategy started in 2020 was from the start of the journey of improvement. Putting in stronger governance, stronger decision making, and stronger assessment of the assets we've got. What we're doing now is to take that now to the next level, where we're certainly putting in the action plan that sits behind the process. So very solid foundations of the original asset management plan. What we're now doing, particularly with our property elements, is bringing that together for both asset management and property into one comprehensive document. This way, it's important. Going through this.
Thank you. Just one question on this item. What is the current staffing level in the capital projects and property team, and is that going to increase any further?
I'm going to get the figures wrong, so I'm going to have to ask Jonathan to comment on that.
So currently we're around about 55 members of staff. We have around 120 with the overall structure chart. That's across capital projects as well as property, so that can grow and reduce obviously as capital program. That's the sort of more.
There are more questions if we go to the resolution set out. So we all have to agree. So item 11, which is the external property review, as I said, in some ways that item to come before the other, but never mind. It forced me to introduce this. So just in terms of the independent external property review, it gets to 12 recommendations for improvement, and this report does include an action plan, which does include a full response to each of the future really routine defined actions and dates by when we need to. So really important point, but just to give a bit of context, I became leader in 2021, and the following there was some allegations at the time surrounding various historical high profile property transaction. I was concerned, as many councillors were, across the political divide. So I did approach the leader of the opposition and was then the chief executive, and we did determine that we would give permission to external property review, which would be an independent review. Property decision making there. So, as has been stressed, I am really pleased to present this report from an independent investigator and auditor, and he did interview various members of staff, various politicians, and I think we have to be really clear whereas we're not able to change what has previously happened, we do now have some assurances, and we just, as an example, about our current processes and recommendations, about further actions which we do need to put in place to ensure that our acquisitions and disposal are carried out in an open and transparent manner. So you have to look forward on this. So we can't change the past, but what we do need is those assurances. In place. That report does acknowledge where we're on the way, imagine. So tonight, the recommendations are that I'm asking Cabinet to accept and agree with all the recommendations, or 12, which are listed on page 6, I believe, that contain, and to approve the external property action plan, which is to address the 12 recommendations. So I'll ask the Cabinet to agree that tonight. Questions?
Just to say, obviously, we had big discussions about this, and we said that the value of property in borough is, of enormous proportions, and it's absolutely essential that there is trust split, and if processes are opaque and not even understood by elected members, then even if there has been no wrongdoing, actually the perception of wrongdoing, it has a huge impact on the reputation of the council. So, I welcome this and welcome that. I hope that we can obviously return to this, I know will be part of the council scrutiny process to ensure that we are implementing this.
Yeah, I really want to say that not only do I welcome the report, but I think it's really important that it is in the documents tonight. I think it's really important that it's come to cabinet, that it's been published openly, and that we've agreed to the report for themselves. And I think that that's really good because it's been a long journey. And links to the previous report, I think we're in a position where we can really have some strong governance, and we must hold on to the transparency and to have sound systems. So we will report that the lead shown in commissioning.
Questions?
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. So firstly, in relation to 141 Station Road, the report didn't seem to attempt to answer who had handed the site to Terry Keys, why no tender scoring process occurred, or why no due diligence was done regarding Mr. Keys or his company. Are you disappointed that the report seems to have omitted this key area of investigation? Second question was, how many people were not interviewed by Mr. Buss as a result of agreements with the Met? And finally, a number of instances suggest that scrutiny didn't take place, was misinformed, recommendations were disregarded, a scrutiny report was asked to be referred to corporate committee or internal audit, but appears to have arrived with neither. Does this therefore suggest that the strong leadership and cabinet style of the governance leaves scrutiny at Harrogate Council under-supported, under-resourced and undervalued, and is there an argument for a different style of council?
Not that they are the questions then. So, just in reference to Station Road, am I disappointed? Well, I'm disappointed that we were in that position to begin with. But as I stressed in my intro, we can't change the past. So what we can do is make sure that the processes that we now have in place are robust and governance is strong, and we never have that kind of situation again. I don't know if that does answer your question, but as I said, that was one of the reasons why myself and Andrew decided. So we have done that, and we have to look forward to make sure that something like that. Sorry, your second question.
How many people were not interviewed by Mr. Buss as a result of agreement with the Met?
Okay, well, the short answer is I don't know. So I don't. Independent report, so Chris Buss report would have in conversation. He's quite right, don't know. Your first question.
Was about the various references to scrutiny either not being considered, not taking place, not being overridden by cabinet, and whether there was an argument for a different style, and an approach to scrutiny.
I'm not sure one leads to the conclusion, you know, so I think scrutiny is very important, it's a very important function. And all I can say is that myself and my seems to be, some members of the cabinet have been scrutiny chairs, very successful scrutiny chairs, I might add, looking towards Councillor Gordon. Sorry, and Councillor Joe. So, and so.
That's why I'm here.
So I'm not sure it necessarily leads to the conclusion that we have to have different type of council. I think what it does mean is that we use the scrutiny function to the best of our abilities and make sure that it functions in the way that it should. I'll be chairing this. So we can move on to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 142. Are we all in agreement? Excellent. Okay, so item 12, which is the housing services improvement plan and compliance assurance statement. Councillor.
As you know, we insourced homes for Harrogate on the 1st of June 2022. And I'm proud to be the cabinet member overseeing such an important function of the council, providing homes for our residents, tenants and leaseholders that they're proud of, where they can raise their families, and where they can set down their roots in our borough. A good home is transformative, but we've been letting many of our residents down over many years. Following the insourcing, we actively sought external views on the performance of our housing services and the results were so. We take these findings extremely seriously and self-referred ourselves to the regulated social housing as soon as major systemic failings were made apparent. Setting out our housing improvement plan is the next step in our journey to transform housing services to our 15,000 tenants and about 5,000 leaseholders in Harrogate, and to our new tenants who will live in council properties once we build the 3,000 homes that we're committed to do. We're serious about change as a council and as a landlord. This plan will be funded by almost £5 million in investment. It will also be closely examined and monitored by an improvement board chaired by the council's chief executive, Andy Dobbin. Also, our residents at the heart of what we do is essential. If we're serious about being an excellent landlord, we need to go far beyond statutory minimum standards and listen to our residents, learn what's important to them, how they'd like us to develop services, and crucially, we need to act on it. So engagement with our residents, tenancy engagement, is a key pillar of the housing improvement plan. There are various priorities in the plan. Each of those will be developed individually with project plans beneath them. And it's not a transformation journey. It's a solid plan for improvement. We've got lots of work to do as a cabinet and as a cabinet member. I recognise how important this is. Good governance and clear reporting to cabinet is set out in this report. So we're assured that progress is being made. In addition, with regards to previous questions, we will also expect scrutiny to ask for specific reports, which will go as standing items to scrutiny panels going forward.
Before I go to questions, just wanted to say a big thank you to David. Who joined us in Joe for the work that they put into this plan. We know you've got some charges in this. I think but that's come into this. So Jenny's really. I know Jen is doing this from annual leave. So any questions from the
Echo those points that made the chair, in terms of the work that the team put into this. It's a really important and important document. As Karen mentioned, scrutiny and the kind of documents that will be going to scrutiny. One of the documents in there will be the annual compliance assurance statement, which will obviously be an incredibly important document in terms of really whether we're achieving those goals. I wondered, in terms of prioritisation, how will the council prioritise its housing service improvement efforts?
If you read the plan, there are various priorities within the plan. And we will be working forward on those priorities together. We won't be prioritising one after another. They're all specific pieces of work that we will be doing. The improvement board will also be monitoring these specific areas, and as I've said, there will be project plans underneath them with very strict targets that the improvement board will ensure are being met. This is a live document. So what may happen as we go along this journey is that there may become other priorities that become more important and some that become less. But it's important that the priorities that are in the improvement plan, there's no hierarchy. There are other things that we can include as well, but these are our priorities. And they all have reasons why it's important that we go forward, and they're all interlinked as well. So if we're talking about compliance, and we're talking about repairs, and we're talking about voids and income management, etc. A lot of these are interlinked, so you can't actually just focus on one thing and then not worry about the others.
Questions from the camp? Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. Since the insourcing of Homes for Haringey, there's been a lot of poor practice come to light, which partly led to the self-referral to the regulator. How much did you know about the full extent of the problems when the insourcing decision was made, and how much has come as a shock to the cabinet? And then another question was around the tenant satisfaction, which was 45%, and leaseholder at 18%. How do you feel about those, and how are you going to address those? Because that's really, really low in terms of satisfaction.
Thank you. At point of insourcing, one of the reasons that we insourced Homes for Haringey was to improve services. And at the point of insourcing, there was some awareness that there were some problems. However, it was the decision to actually carry out a so-called independent so-called State of the Nation report, which looked at across the service when the service was insourced, that revealed the extent of problems. Some had been apparent, but others had not been nearly as apparent before the state of before there was an external analysis. And in terms of sorry, the second question was, are we concerned? Well, obviously, we're very concerned at the low level of satisfaction in the tenancy satisfaction review, and this is something that, in terms of the regulations that have come in, these are the satisfaction measures that we are going to have to ask tenants about going forward from this month. Continually doing these surveys, and I certainly hope that we will start to see the satisfaction measures increasing. And the tenants that we have, our tenants and leaseholders, are the judge of what we're going to find, is what we need to mark ourselves against, is their experience of the services that we're offering to them. So they're very, very important. And I expect to see them. Sorry, I'm just going to let David come in.
So just to add to the point that you made around the state of the nation report and just particularly on the building compliance sort of working the journey there. So although as a council we were aware that there were issues based on previous work that had been done apparently the state of the nation report did recommend that we do a follow-up independent external review, particularly of building compliance, because what we commissioned later last year. And it was on the basis of that work that we then took the decision to set up our regulation. We lifted the lid, we realised that our number would need to be in some specific compliance areas, and we referred to the regulator. So we also had that journey really where we kind of did much more in depth look at that area once we had brought this up.
If there's no more questions, if we can approve the recommendations set out. Anyone agree? Item 13, which is the done.
Dunmold is serious, and I, for one, am pleased that it is getting the level of attention that it is across the sector. It's something that affects a lot of tenanted properties, whether in social or the private sector. We have homes that contain moisture, residents who can't afford heating, do not have space inside to dry and walk, and the failures of landlords to deal with repairs in a timely manner. And we also have an outstock in Haringey, some of our stock which is old and which have systemic problems. And for a long time, blame was put on residents and so-called lifestyle issues. And the spotlight, the Housing Ombudsman spotlight Dan World and the Secretary of State's recent intervention following the very sad death of our bishop, who died with mold in his blood and in his lungs, pointed out that this is not a lifestyle issue and should be treated as such. This policy is a policy really of three parts. It firstly looks at how we will prevent damp mold from occurring within our properties. It then considers the way in which we'll identify existing cases of damp mold in our housing stock, whether that is by proactively looking for cases or by them being reported by tenants directly or to us as councillors. And then finally it describes what we will do to treat cases of damp mold once they've been identified, with timescales and actions depending on the severity of damp mold to the property. With a strong damp mold policy in place, tenants and leaseholders can be confident we take this extremely seriously, and officers will also have a framework within which to deal with the problem in a timely manner. So I recommend this.
Maybe it's not a very good question, maybe it's just a comment, because obviously the beginning talked about damp and mold as an epidemic, which was certainly the government report quoting that. And our report says that we must ensure that residents are listened to and responded to effectively, and there was a zero tolerance approach to damp and mold, which absolutely must be the case. But I think, there are two sides to this. There is our existing stock that's related to our housing services improvement plan. The more that works, the more this will work. but also a housing energy action plan, which is about retrofitting our homes, that thousands of homes, one of the most ambitious schemes in the country. And obviously that is about good air quality, and energy efficiency within the home, which will help address that. I think maybe if there was a question on this, it would be, it talks about the review in March 24, which is actually really quite rapid. Do we feel, and I guess this might be a difficult question to ask right now, but we have the tools, I guess, our housing improvement plan to dovetail into this, that we can actually see the kind of massive improvements that are in this report by March 24.
I think we're going to see substantial improvements because of the way that we're now addressing damage model. And we've set up a dedicated email address, we've set up a dedicated phone line. We have other policies, as we've said, which dovetail with this. So not only is it in terms of retrofitting, we also have going forward our major works contracts, which is a commitment to spend over the next. We spend £800 million over the next 10 years. We have a decant policy which lays out exactly where we're going to decant this with. So there are a lot of there's the improvement plan. There are lots of different policies coming forward which will also help with the resolution of damage mold. But really, the most important thing about dealing with damage mold is the recognition of the seriousness of the health implications on our residents, on any residents, of living in homes with damp and toxic mold. And it's about taking that really seriously and the determination to do so that's going to make the difference.
More questions from Karen? That's Barnes.
Thank you. Policy talks about giving households dehumidifiers, which is welcome, but given the cost of energy, will tenants be able to afford to use them without any support to help them? How do you measure against the 26 recommendations from the Spotlight report? And I appreciate that may be a written answer, but it's 26. And finally, this strategy comes with new funding. Are you expected to move forward more funding in year or hoping to fund these improvements from within the existing HRA repairs budget?
I'll deal with the last first. We are expecting to fund this within our existing budgeting because it is part of what we actually repairs. Sorry, your first question.
It's about how households will be able to use the humidifiers.
Yes, we do actually provide funding to financial support for households using dehumidifiers. And the second one, the last one.
How did they measure against the 26 recommendations from the Spotlight report?
And we can give you a response on that.
Thank you.
So we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations set out on page 308. We all in agreement? Item 40, Civic Centre project update, Councillor Ward.
Well, I'm really pleased to be bringing forward this paper on the Civic Centre. We've got a rich history that is sort of embodied in Civic Centre building, which is a social history of the borough. There's been many a demonstration outside that building, many of which have been on myself. And I think we want to embrace all of that because that is really what marriage is about, people having their say and you know, when they don't feel they're getting strong enough, say, being outside the Civic Centre and shouting and raising some placards. But you know, we embrace all of that. But that's not the main reason for doing this. We've got many reasons. We absolutely need to have a centralised area where the staff can, at the core function of the council, and we can do that in this this building. We've been able to sort of by going through this refreshing the business case. We've sense checked that we're absolutely assured and feel confident that this is the best way of doing this. It's going to enable us to release other buildings so that we can have an opportunity of doing that. And you know, if we were to take other alternatives, for example, you know, staying put in Alex House or in River Park House, then actually the business case for that would be far more expensive than than what we are putting forward for the restoration of the Civic Centre, which I want to remind you is a Grade 2 listed building, a very fine building at that. I think it really answers points to having an area where staff can be proud to work in and give them the conditions for a future working environment that is going to be much more pleasant than many of the offices that we make them work in at the moment. We think that will be good for staff retention and for staff recruitment. And we also think that the Civic Centre can be a venue where the public can come into that and make use of that building. So the old registrar's wing, for example, you know, we've got plans about how we can use that as almost like a sort of mini museum of all artifacts that we've got and that need to be on display. There's plans that are part of this this proposal where we would have, you know, plinths, for example, for display of artwork of local artists. That I think would be of interest. So it means that what we hope to do is this building will be for staff, but it will also, we want to make sure that the general public are going to be welcome in this building and feel that it's their building as well. And I think we've gone above and beyond in terms of engagement, you know, where we are talking to local schools, we're talking to the church about how we're going to co-design the gardens to the south of the building. And so there's lots of sort of exciting projects that we will be developing in a co-produced way as part of this. But above all, I'm also confident that it is the most prudent way forward for us developing this building. So I'll leave my remarks there and ask for questions.
Very support. This is great. I've got one question very short, which is, so the certificate, the BREEAM certification stands for Building Research Establishment Environment Assessment Method. Everyone, yeah, no, is that, yeah, I didn't have that in my memory, but on the screen here. But it essentially is about the sustainability of a building project. So the question is, how BREEAM is the project?
I don't anticipate you asking that question. Well, I think we don't need BREEAM actually, and if that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, so we're on course to achieve outstanding. And then so the BREEAM becomes in different categories, as you'll be aware, and outstanding is the top one. We want to make sure that this is an exemplar building that we want to end up with at the end of the day. So we're on course to achieve BREEAM outstanding. Net zero carbon is the target for the London plan. Net zero operational carbon target as well. So we're not just talking about the way in which it's constructed, but also how it will operate as a building, and in terms of ventilation and heating costs and so on and so forth. Yes, there's something about the building design which incorporates Breeze Soleil, but I'm going to leave it to officers to do get to a translation, but I think that's to do with how you can have a building that is, and if anybody's got memories of sitting in the council chamber in the winter when you're absolutely freezing and in the summer when it's sweltering, then I'm hoping and, I'm promising that it will be a completely different experience. By the way, in terms of engagement in this, we've got a cross-party working group where we are, but we've gone on we visited the Waltham Forest Town Hall, next week or this week. We've got visits to Tower Hamlets tomorrow. Thank you. We've got a visit to Tower Hamlets, so we've got a working group of members that is cross-party that we've been discussing with, and obviously we're very keen that members have a particular say within the confines of a grade 2 listed status about how the chamber itself is going to look. There is working parties amongst the staff, so they've got to say about what sort of expectations they've got out of the building. And we've been working, as I said before, with the local schools and local residents to bring them on board with how they want to see the building for use by local residents as well. So I don't know whether officers can add anything more, Brianne.
I've got really well. That means it's like visualizing architecture of things on the building. So that angle of particular way to provide shading what's doing there. So you're using the ventilation.
Thank you, Councillor. Only two on this one. The first was how many people attended the public drop-in sessions and what was their response? And second was when this decision was first made, the Dems asked why River Park House was not included in calculations, either in terms of refitting it for council use or renting it out. And just got the argument that we haven't made a decision on River Park House. Given the council retested the options, why was River Park House once again not included?
Well, I'm going to ask Ross to come in on the engagement numbers, so I've got them to hand. And part of this process has been to reassess what possibilities would have been with River Park House and Alex House, and we've basically put the figures through the rinser to make sure that we are doing the right thing, and we're absolutely convinced that it would be far more expensive to get those buildings, and it just mean that we would, it then releases those buildings for other plans that we can have in the future that we will bring forward. There will be another paper that comes before cabinet with before we go ahead. So we've still got time to sort of keep going through those numbers and so on. But we're absolutely convinced this is the cheapest option in order to get all of the staff into one place. I've got a feeling in the top of my head it's 900 staff can be accommodated. I think they've got that wrong. I think, yes, am I right?
So that's not the time that you think one time, obviously working. Start with
Yeah, but we've done an assessment, and that's what we need in terms of how many people are doing home working. But we don't want, we want staff to be working in the borough as well. So it's about, we recognise that some people will be working from home because, COVID's given us that experience. But we also want to make sure that we've got presence of staff in the borough and that the public know where to come to in terms of accessing those staff as well. I think there was something about the public engagement though, could you just
and I'm just going to take on Professor, and I don't exactly in front of me. I think we held two sessions, one for in primary school to coincide with the end. On the evening, second session at Green Library. I'm not just part of afterwards, but they're also part of the planning applications submitted, and they're also part of that planning application process.
So the decision for this will be taken after consideration of item 50, which is to approve the year's strategy.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really pleased to be able to bring the strategy to Cabinet finally. It's been developed over quite a long period. It's had a lot of involvement from lots of different stakeholders, particularly private function providers, nursery schools, children's centres, and health departments are critical in the early years programme. I suppose it's quite different because I never thought that early years would be top of the national agenda, but with the recent budget, of course, and the announcements of this $4 billion going into early years, so it is quite a big national issue. We can be really proud of our early years here as a council. We have 6 centres which have been designated outstanding. By also including our 3 nursery schools and children's centres. That is quite something. And we have a record 98% of outstanding in our early years sector. So really the strategy is over these people, and with all these departments, there are 5 strategic aims and 7 priorities. And I doubt that there will be any disagreement with any of those. And I was hoping as we develop the strategy, we will also be working closely with the AEC on supporting people into employment. But I am pleased that this strategy focuses on children, quality standards, special needs, early identification, all the things we know make enormous difference to children's lives and their outcomes. That is without a shadow of a doubt. So I think it will be a strategy.
Questions?
You missed one really important thing out, which is that Haringey's Children's Services received an Ofsted Good rating recently, which I think underlines just the incredible work of yourself and the children's team. I mean, this is a historic moment that we can be incredibly proud of, and I think only with the stability and trust between the politicians and the officers, and this incredible hard work really come to fruition. And obviously this is just part of that, and it gives real faith that actually what's going to come out of this will be something really, really special. So yeah.
Very lots of mistakes, so I think the credit goes to Andy.
Any more questions? As a bond.
You see that you're looking at the expectation there.
I'm thinking we might have unanimity here.
So it's just a couple of questions around the funding. So it says, the report says the delivery will depend on existing funding streams and resources. So how much of the strategy is actually deliverable in the near term? And then the report goes on to say that other funding bids to resource the strategy will be explored. Do you have any expectations for how much other funding bids could raise?
I'll probably ask Nick to answer part 2. I think most of it is actually in place, because the funding is the funding that comes from, most of it comes from the dedicated status grant in the NIS block. And of course, that is subject to what the government's national funding formula and so on. And that can be a bit problematic, as we all know the childcare providers are underfunded, and even with the new money coming, there will still be a gap. But that's not something the council will be about. In terms of bidding, and bidding this time, we were awarded the one of 75 authorities that got the family house, and the first one going to be in June at the Triangle, but also we're quite successful to secure some money from health to also find some gaps, but to catch up, I think, particularly speech and language. But I think Nick, who is online, can probably respond in more detail.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as Councillor Brabazon said, we got funding for the family hub, you know, is 1.2 million. So even, and that was since we put the draft strategy together. So I think if when there's any funding opportunity, we're certainly going to look at, you know, how we can apply for that and whether what services that can support. I think one of the other real key elements of funding is around increasing the number of 3 and 4 year olds that access free childcare, the free entitlement for 15 hours and 30 hours, because that the more children we get into nurseries, the more funding actually we get as a local authority, because we have 5% that we retain, and therefore we're able to use that funding to support some of the priorities that we've got into our strategy. So we're certainly looking at any funding opportunities that come our way. And as we know, you know, early years, you know, we know it's quite controversial, but you know, early years, you know, is a high priority for government at the moment. So we're just listening out for what opportunities may come our way. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. So if there's no more questions, if we can group recommendations as set out on page 374. So item 16, footway parking.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to start with the slogan because Mike taught me how to do it. So our pavements are not for cars, if I'm going to slogan here. Our pavements are for people, and pavement parking is a major issue for our wheelchair users, buggy users, older people, and dangerous for our young children, visually impaired, and a range of other physical disability and mobility needs. And what you've got in front of you is for us to firstly agree a policy, because we don't have a policy. The policy is looking at 102 roads in our borough that have legal pavement parking, and there's examples in the policy of what we mean by that, and it covers it covers the whole legal process that we will be needing to navigate, and all of the laws and all the regulations that we're going to need to navigate to start looking at how we're going to remove some of them. The policy is attached and that provides the criteria that we'll be working towards. So in a nutshell, we'll be agreeing the policy, the criteria, the methodology to proceed with the removal if they're viable, and when they may not be viable, and because we know we can't remove all of them, and those of the CPZ will be done first with the CPZ review and consultation. So I'll leave my comments there and take any questions.
Questions?
Well, as we know that, you know, holding celebrating this policy is absolutely fantastic, and like I said, members of the people, and the reality, there's nothing that shows the colonisation of cars on our public spaces than cars parked on pavements, obstructing the way of people, especially people with buggies and people with mobility issues, etc. So it's like completely celebrating this. I guess if I was going to ask any question, it would be on Appendix D, and I guess just a clarification on what the meaning of a review of current permitted footway parking means in the context of that. So it's really just for other people to understand what that means.
So I know that you read this policy in great depth, and we're just asking to give you an opportunity to answer that. But I think we've got 102 roads in the borough that have pavement parking, and some of them are going to be easy just to take off the pavement and put on the carriageway. Some of them are not going to be easy. If they were put there for a reason, and then we need to start looking at traffic flow, we need to do a real big assessment. It could mean that we turn that road one way, and then that becomes the major transport planning infrastructure we have, or it could be that it's not viable. And so they're the things that we need to look at. So I don't want anyone being under the impression that we are now all 102 roads are definite. there is a criteria that we're following. We know that some are in the green, we know some are in the amber, and we know some are in the red. But everyone should know that there is one strict criteria, and that's what we're following. And if your pavement parking is removed, you follow the criteria, and if your pavement parking is not removed, it's because of the criteria. And it's the fairest way that we can do this. Obviously, we're very lucky in Haringey. We've got some older roads, you know, the M1 road, the road, these go back to old times. They weren't built for the level of cars, that roads weren't built for the level of cars that we're seeing, and weren't built for the capacity and that we're seeing when people owning car ownership. And so somebody's got to give somewhere, but we also are bound by different legislation for the Road Traffic Act to make sure that we do statutory consultations and have to take note of what people are saying. So I hope that answered your question. Every single one of those 102 roads are complicated. And what I will also say is even on the same road, it could be complicated because it could be smaller on one end and higher on one end. There could be a turning on one end and one could be turning on the other end. So it's a really complicated job. I think that's why we're giving ourselves 3 to 5 minutes, and we're not saying we're going to do this overnight.
More questions?
AG Councillor Ahmed. Just a couple. Could you explain the thinking behind the right rating in section 3? So question 1, the red areas should be seen as high priority. Questions 2 and 3, the red areas make them more complicated and therefore might be thought of as lower priority. So we found that a bit confusing. And do you want the second question?
Yes, please.
And then in 3.3, question 2 says if 25% parking is lost, then this is still like rated as green. And how is this percentage chosen, as many residents may interpret that as a significant change?
So you're right, the rank rating is confusing. There's different layers to it. So for example, we're going to take the road lane as a good example. If we do put those cars back onto the carriageway, then the 267 buses can't pass each other. However, through some engineering, we could have passing points where those buses could kind of dent into road. However, the road lane is currently part of the LTN and it's only a bus lane. If it does ever revert, because we don't know the outcome of the LTN scope, then it's not going to be possible to do. So there's all of these kinds of little factors that come in and what makes it possible, what makes it not possible. So that's why it's not just red and green. It's got you find something out, and then it's Piccadilly Circus tiling. So that's why it looks like that. So there's different things. If you want us to make it more clear, I think we tried to do an illustration. There is actually a complex model behind that, and that's trying to show the illustration of it. In terms of 25% parking, obviously that is a, you know, for some roads that could be 3 or 4 cars, for some roads that could be 20 or 30 cars. And so someone like Haringey Road, which is quite a long road, that in quantity is quite a lot of cars, but in terms of how to move roads, there's still going to be a lot of parking there, there's still going to be a lot of parking available. And I guess it's about balance. We need to think about the vision of what we want to be. And I personally don't want to be a borough where a mother with a buggy needs to go out into the road because she can't pass a lamppost and a parked car. So, or that, or anybody with a buggy, or somebody who's elderly that can't pass because they can't get their trolley through. This is not the borough that I want to kind of live in. It's not the borough that I want to be. So, you know, we've got to be clear about our vision. And as I said in the beginning, pavements are not cars. And so, to be honest with you, I'm surprised you're challenging me and why it's only 25%. And I'll leave that for the next questions. I've got quite a few people who might look back to it.
And just to add, it's not just buggies, because toddlers also struggle. I say that. Okay, all right, so if we can move to the resolution on this, which is to approve the recommendations of Item 17, flood water management investment.
Thank you, Lisa. So I just want another slogan for t-shirts that I'm buying in Councillor Carter. This one says, climate change is here. This is no longer something we're talking about in the future. I just want to talk about last year. We saw heavy snow, heavy rain and 40-degree summer all in 1 year. That's like the North Pole and the Sahara in 1 year in the same country. It doesn't make any sense. And so flooding is a major consequence to climate change. And this is why we're committing £1.5 million to build our defences against climate change and the impact of flooding. And in your document, in the paper, what you would see is in Appendix 1 of all of the work that we're doing. This includes cleaning our drains and gullies, which is more of a kind of common thing because we've got over 15,000 drains and gullies in the borough. But it also is looking at some of the technology of building suds and rain gardens to make sure that we can store water and slowly release it in the sewer system. And then there's also other things like permeable paving and making sure that we have places where we're using things like swales in our parks so they can collect water. Examples of all of these glamorous things that I'm learning about as I've become a cabinet member in this field are all put in pictures in Appendix 3. And we're also needing to understand that in London we're spoiled. There are many places across the country, especially around the coastal lines, where having sandbags on the side of the streets are normal. And actually, they're coastal cities and they've always been planning for this. And in London, people sort of screamed and thought, oh my God, I can't get a train. And nobody knew what to do. And so we really need to make sure that our residents are ready and that our businesses are ready. And so in 6.5 is our framework, which ironically is also called Ready. And it talks about how we're going to move people from the city to coastal mentality and how we need to ensure that our businesses understand how they equip themselves, how our residents understand. And I think if you take Hornsey as a good example, the amount of residents I've had in Hornsey that didn't know that they were in a flood area, they've never known. The amount of people in No Park Estate that didn't know that they were living on top of the Moselle River, they didn't know, they've never known. And I will always remember one man who phoned me and said, "You're not cleaning my drains, I live on Colbert Road," and that made me know that there was a problem with the culvert and actually the whole thing collapsed. And people just don't know. They actually think that this stuff happened somewhere in Coronation Street, like they don't realise that this is actually happening. So just to conclude, what you're agreeing today is the funding, and what you're also agreeing is the programme. And what you're also agreeing to is our Ready framework as we move forward to get our residents and businesses ready. Timely changes it takes effect.
Thank you. Councillor Carmen.
As a resident of Hornsey, and as you know, myself and the river run under are carpeted, run under the streets around the house. I'm very pleased seeing if we're taking some proactive action to deal with floods. Because when the recent floods happened a couple of years ago, it was one in the 60-year, it's supposed to be one in the 60-year event. But with climate change, we can't assume that. And there were properties where the water just rose up through people's business. It didn't run across, it wasn't like an overflowing river. It just rose up through their houses. And so I think this is a very necessary action to take.
So I really welcome this. It's a really important report. As you underlined, the impacts of climate change are being seen, in fact, most acutely in flooding in our city. And Harrogate, I think, has 9 critical drainage areas. So these are areas which are most prone to flooding. A lot of them are in the east of the borough as well. So, there are sort of glamorous and less glamorous ways of dealing with this issue. Some of them, like I say, the drains, which probably seen as the less glamorous, but are absolutely critically important. But also we have the more glamorous, which is the suds and the rainwater gardens, things like that. And this has shown that we've got a wide array of these, and also that we're working with partners. and I sit on the regional flood and coastal committee as part of part of the London Council's position, and you know the importance of that partnership working in this, especially for funding, but also for information sharing. I know a team that you oversee, the flood team in highways, doing incredible work, and they're well thought of in other boroughs and in the RFCC as well. And you know, the importance and urgency of this work can't be stressed enough, and it's so great to see that there are so many projects that are ongoing.
I just say, I do actually want to say that if you haven't met Pancake Shaw, he is an absolute genius. And if you are everyone who wants to be a millionaire, having this wonderful phone friends, you can question, he's going to calm, mate, he's going to know the answer.
Thank you. Just two questions. One, what is the current timescale for work on the Queenswood flood management scheme? And secondly, do you think Thames Water is doing enough to maintain its assets?
Sensitive question there, that last one. I do feel for Thames Water because they are operating a Victorian system and that should have been invested in for many decades. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of homes being built, people having power showers, people having ensuite bathrooms, people having all sorts of water that's going in and out of it. It wasn't built for this, we know that. And so I do think that what they're suffering from is decades of neglect, but this is what happens when Thatcher decided to privatise public assets and create private companies like Thames Water, because we've got to recognise that Thames Water is a private company and what their interests are. So there's, I'm in two parts. I can see the problem. I just wanted to be more proactive about it. And when we take somewhere like Park Road, the amount of pressure that Mark and his team had to put on to Thames Water to fix that sewer was unbelievable. It shouldn't have been like that. It shouldn't be able to vote and say, do it for that, and then you can fix. However, we're going to continue putting on pressure, and we're going to continue to ask them to fix things in our borough. But we know that we're competing with every other London borough also asking for the same thing. And so something's got to give. But I can be quite bossy, so we're going to carry on asking. And now we've got Barry here, we've got Mark and his team, and we've got Pancake. I guess what we're able to do is build a partnership with Thames Water, because we're not just saying we think this is happening, we're actually doing and paying for investigations ourselves and making it really easy for them to come and know what the problem is, rather than asking them to come and do a review, wait a few months, do another review, and we're getting all of that done ourselves. And then we say, I have evidence to say that this is that's being on fixing. So it's really fast tracking some of our responses from Thames Water. In terms of your question about, what was the question about? I forgot the first question. I mean, sorry, that's a Thames Water thing just got me. Queenswood. So I think Barry wants to come in on that. What I would say is we were working with all of the stakeholders. Sometimes it's not going to be at the pace that we want it to be. And so I guess I'm going to leave my comments there and let Barry take over the rest.
Thanks very much. Yeah, just to say that at the moment, the reviews work underway. We're looking at the retaining wall in the area, which I think is structural associated with it. We're also working with a local reference group to try and design the right outcome. But because it's a complicated issue, it's something we often raise. So I think we should excitement. So that's how it included in the next year, the next financial year, see if possible.
So there's not really March for next year.
We're looking as part of the program. But yeah, it depends on the solution ultimately, but it's proactively being worked.
Move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out page 460 to 461. All in agreement? Item 18, part of the investment plan.
Thank you. You'd be really disappointed because I tried to think of a slogan from another t-shirt from Councillor Carter, but I couldn't think of anything that you like with parking in it. So I didn't do it. So I do want to say that every time people think of parking, they just think of PCNs and they think of parking on the high street, but it's actually, and I hope you when you read this report, you saw that there are different variables to it. I would like to say that a couple of years ago, the law changed during COVID, and London authorities were allowed, local authorities were allowed to implement red routes before it was only TfL that done that. I think we are the first London authorities who have done it. And we have put it on Brandon Road in Northumberland Park. And it's the first local authority red route, we believe, in London. I might say second, just in case someone else claims the first, but I'm going to be confident, I think it is the first. So it's the first time we use that law, and I really do want to say to the team, they really navigated making sure that they understood the criteria and that we did get the right approvals from the relevant bodies to do that. So in here, we're now confident that we're going to do some more. And this is just to make people aware, the differences between a red route and a non-red route is that now we can enforce people who are parking by camera, and you cannot exit every people's enforced by camera and people who park on any other kinds of restrictions, but red routes you can, so they're really starting to develop. I will say that again, we are bound by the Road Traffic Act, but we did try to also put a red route on Clarendon Road in no parking with green, and the residents overwhelmingly voted no to that, and so therefore we have to follow the central consultation period. The other things in there is obviously disabled parking. We are now very close for every single one of our bays to be converted to dedicated bays, and we're also very close to converting all of our bays to be to the 6.6 metre DMC guidance for disabled bays, and all of our bays are actually 5.5 metres, so just standard bays with the word disabled written on it. So residents challenged us on that, disabled residents challenged on that rightly, and so we're very close to converting all of them, and any new ones will be in the new then. And then there's loads of little things in here around the stuff around doctors' bays and loading bays, etc. And the other big thing that I need to mention is CPZs. So in here is our programme for our CPZs. We did commit that we review all of our CPZs every 5 years, and also we've got a huge waiting list of the CPZs in their areas, so we need to work on implementing that. So in the appendix, you'll see all the CPZs being implemented, all the CPZ projects, the proposed red route programme, and obviously the football parking now that you guys have improved the football parking obviously. I'm taking a question.
It's another one where there is some, there was a t-shirt there. Yeah, I say, well, so the parking policy, parking itself and the way that we address it, obviously it helps improve road safety, but it also helps boost for a cleaner, greener and less congested borough, and less congested environment. Then it tackles health inequalities, can encourage active travel, and improve air quality. So, and obviously part of that tackling inequalities is also prioritising those which are restricting mobility. So it has a lot of the elements that are part of our walking and cycling and sustainability ambitions are all locked into it. They're quietly there, like the footway parking is part of this investment plan. So it is an important critical part that is less understood or less obvious in terms of its connections, but they're definitely there. And this and a lot of the other two plans are part of that ambition. Thanks.
Did you hear t-shirts?
No, okay, it's good. It's not,
Okay. Any more questions? No, so no questions. Okay, so can we move to the resolution with the briefing and recommendations set out at page 484? Agreed. And we take a short break on the house, which I'm going to call and send to I'm going to introduce it the next item 19, which is REPA, which is short for Regulatory or Investigatory Plan Act 2000. So the aim of this is to think about the issues relevant to the use of the mitigatory power under REPA, and the recommendation is that having notes the use of REPA by the council. It's the for the senior responsible officer to make sequential updates to policy, and so this is for amendments which will not affect approaches to surveillance. Anything change with regards to this, it was to so is there any questions? Councillor Bronze? No. Okay, well, that's. So the resolution on that is to approve recommendations I set out at page 495 that we will include. Back to Councillor Chinwani. So item 20, which is the road danger reduction investment plan 2023 to 2024.
Thank you, Lisa. I have no more t-shirts for everyone. One of them that I might write about be succinct when you ask the questions. Councillor Parson is my next t-shirt, so I'm going to start with actually thanking Danny, Michael, Cindy and Annie, so I keep forgetting to be obviously Ryan. I do want to remind people that don't know, and just let people that might be listening at home, that about 10 years ago I was run over by a bus. Actually probably 20 years ago now, beginning to realize how old I am. So this is something really close to my heart, and I'm not a driver, and all I was doing was waiting for a bus, and so it can happen to anybody. As you may know, the Mayor has a Vision Zero target, and that is to make sure that we eliminate the serious conditions by 2040. And he uses the Mayor uses the safe systems model, and so are we. And it comes from one of the Nordic countries, and basically it's divided up into 5 segments, which you can see in 6.2 of the report. Safe streets, safe speed, safe vehicles, safe behaviours, and post-collision response. I went to an event that we helped, well, we gave them a room to do it in the library, run by the Living Streets Group, who at Hornsey Library ran a conference last month on Vision Zero and road safety. And it was a really interesting meeting. And their biggest concern actually was the last bit of this, which is the post-collision response. And when I've spoken to the team, they also sometimes don't know that there's been an accident. And the way that it's reported is quite weak, and that's not something that actually needs to happen yet. That's something happening across London and across the UK. So I do want to say that I really want to give a little bit of a shout out to Chief Inspector Walter, who's giving us direct support from the legal officer, who will be meeting with next week to actually start developing. I don't want to put any pressure on them, but I just basically wanted the best condition response in London. So that's our ambition. So hopefully we'll get there. So in here, we've reminded everybody of the same systems model. We've gone over the data, and you can see more detail of the data in Appendix D. We reminded everybody of last year's progress, and we're explaining the complications of the internal and external finances, and then you can see the progress against the plan and the detailed budgets that's there. So in a nutshell, you're agreeing the plan for next year, agreeing the funding, noting the progress and noting the model.
Questions?
It's a question, it is just to welcome this report, and absolutely, the reality is that road safety is an absolute priority for us, and the direction of travel has been of improvement in the last few years, and we've seen the number of killed and seriously injured on our roads, but also slight injuries. They have a real impact on people's lives and their confidence and all kinds of things. So it's absolutely essential that they come down, and the trajectory has been down. And I think it's worth pointing out that the anomaly is 2020, where it really reduced quite massively. And of course, that was during the COVID lockdown. So the volume of cars on our roads has a huge impact on the number of injuries. But I'd say what we're doing is taking a safe systems approach, which means we're designing a city, we're designing that out of our borough, and it's obviously welcomed, and it's got to keep that kind of level of investment going.
Thank you. I know that we're hoping, or you're hoping, that all council-owned roads will have a max speed limit of 20 miles an hour as that by the end of next year. What are the chances of also being able to introduce that along with the TfL-owned roads where there has been some decreases, but not necessarily to the 20? In line with the overall plan, can the council make it its default policy that cycle lanes should be segregated from the road? I would really like that personally because I find it quite terrifying. And finally, are you expecting TfL's financial issues to have any effect on the council's ability to take the entire plan forward?
Thank you. I'll start with the last one first. I'm going to defer the cycle lane thing. It's actually isn't my portfolio, but it's under Barry's remit, so he can answer that. So in terms of the funding, it's really interesting because they've got this really ambitious target, and there is no real funding behind it. And so that's quite frustrating to have this target and then not really have this oomph of money. So what you will see here is that we've always committed in our NTFS that we will be ambitious enough. We've committed in our manifesto and the NTFS that we're looking at 8 million over the course of this administration, and we're borrowing some of it to make this happen, because if we kept waiting and kept bidding and kept competing against other buyers, we wouldn't have been able to do half what we really wanted to do, and people's lives are in danger. So we have taken the strong lead of actually borrowing money. And in terms of 20 mile per hour roads, we are now really going to be pushing TfL to look at some of our roads like Boundary Road, like Friday Road, and go back to them and ask them if they can push them down to 20 miles an hour. We're one of the first buyers in London to have a 20 mile per hour travelling across the bar. However, some of those main roads like Boundary Road and Friday Road seem to have objected in the bus routes, and they felt that it was going to slow down the bus routes. I do think that times have changed. I think attitudes have changed, but areas have changed, targets have changed. I think now is the right time to go back to the Norton to review that. That said, the roundway was 40 miles per hour, and we wanted it reduced down to 20 miles per hour. And suddenly we're in this bargaining deal where we want it down to 30 miles per hour. So I know it's still a reduction, you know, win's a win sometimes. But if we're really truly ambitious about moving 20 miles per hour borough, we're going to go back and we're going to have to log that. I will tell you that the speed surveys on the round speeds up to 80 miles per hour, especially at night time. So yes, they put in all the cameras and the infrastructure to capture all of that, and that's all fantastic. But they weren't brave enough to go down to 20 miles per hour on that road. However, they have been brave enough to send the system to and we're welcoming that. That's happening. So I hope that answers your question. I'll hand over to you, Barry, about the cycle lanes.
Thank you. In terms of cycle protection, you have to do wings in as much as possible without any doubt. It's not just for bicycles, but also the power to do. But they are going to be one of them. I think some of the challenges to putting into every single location, though, are both around logistics and around funding. We've got some funding available to us in terms of putting further measures for site protection, and we will continue to lobby and request for more. But I don't think there's enough available to those sort of measures in the cost of the increase. But also practically, some of the roads don't lend themselves to being particularly for example. Segregation. That doesn't mean that we can't be it's not going to be I think one of the things in particular around the junction issue, it's like it's far more vulnerable because of people will be 74%. Junctions, so again, it's around more reduce speeds, raise awareness for driving product behaviour on the approach to junctions, and with a few things so
If there's no more questions, if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 501. Okay. Next one, highways and street lighting investment plan for 2020.
Thank you, Lisa. I've got myself a t-shirt now. We're going to invest £10.5 million on this area of work. This includes our pavements, our potholes, our carriageways, and our street lighting. I talked earlier about the climate in the North Coast of Sahara in 1 year. The impact that has had on our streets is unbelievable. The sinking it has done to some of our pavements, because obviously the mud underneath got really heavily hit by the rain and then really dried out and everything. So all of that has now set us back a little bit. So we really do need to put that investment back in. I do want to take this opportunity before anyone pulls out my mind to remind everybody that while the Prime Minister announced £200 million for potholes, none of that was coming to London. I also want to coincidentally remind people that we have no election in London, but we do have one of the other areas where there is too. We're having to find this money ourselves to invest in it. The big thing that I'm really excited about is our investment in street lighting. We set down an investment commitment that would be increasing street lighting, and we've done the safety of women at night and SWAN survey, where women especially said that they felt very unsafe because of the street lighting. We're currently doing a co-production engagement with residents through the Bright Ideas consultation, which is asking residents where they think our street lighting could be improved. They've already identified 300 locations, and the consultation is still live up until the 30th. So in a nutshell, we are agreeing today our pavement programme, which is in the appendix, including our potholes, all of our carriageway resurfacing, our street lighting. There's 15,000 street lighting that have been converted to LEDs, and explain how we've decided where we're prioritising that money to. So I'll leave my comments there and wait for Councillor Party to endorse my report.
It's very simple. I love LED.
Love it. Any questions? That was very succinct. Any questions? That's long. Okay, all right. So massive investment. So we can move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out at page 530. Do you all agree? Okay. Item 22, parking schemes, resident engagement policy.
Thank you. So in March 2020, a week before lockdown, we released the CPZ policy to make it clear to everybody how you actually get a CPZ in this borough and what the process looked like. 3 years on, we've done a review, and we've kind of used this opportunity to clear up some vagueness in the March 2020 report policy. We've also been clear on the decision-making process, and we've also looked into allowing other types of parking controls. There are more than just CPZs, there are also other 3-letter acronyms like PPAs and RPZs, which unless you know about them, and only one guy in the whole borough didn't know about it, and then he started campaigning to get one, you would never ask, and then you would never know, and then you would never get. So we're now offering that as standard. And I guess in a nutshell, residents should know how to press parking enforcement in the neighbourhood, and I do want to let people know that residents across Harrogate are really wanting this service from us. I don't want people to think they're begging people to get CP, it's worrying. And I'll give you an example of that in my ward. Walpole Road, which is off Lordship Lane, is the last road that is not in the Spurs match lane. It is where every single Spurs supporter who knows is parking, and they are getting the brunt of most of it. And they're actually the Belmont CPZ, nobody else in the Belmont CPZ wants to have the Spurs match lane restrictions. No Spurs support would have gone that far out. All roads are there. They co-designed their own parking scheme, and by co-production, it meant that they had a 70% agreement when they went to statutory consultation, and that's what this engagement tries to do. You let us know what the problems is. Let's design this together, and let it not be a surprise that everyone really wants it when we get to the final hurdle. And so I hope everyone's really supportive of this. I hope this has cleared up a lot of issues that people may have had over the last few years from the last policy. And I hope moving forward, we will have a lot more people being able to have parking that helps them in their neighbourhoods.
One last question. The policy states that, and I'm quoting, there may be some exceptional situations where the council may need to implement controls to manage congestion and road safety without community support. So could you give an example of what such a situation might look like, and who will make the decision that the situation is exceptional enough to override community feeling?
So, the highways team are actually the legal highways authority for the borough. And if we had, I don't know, I'll pick an imaginary road, let's just say Green High Road. And we had people parking on the Green High Road. And all the residents said that they didn't want parking restrictions, but it was delaying the bus route, it was damaging the traffic flow. We have a statutory responsibility to put in something to keep the traffic flow, and that's our legal responsibility. One might say that where we think we need to have parking restrictions is probably around Whitehart Lane and the Spurs Stadium, because there is huge numbers of people coming to park there on a regular basis. And actually, every time we have asked residents whether they want to be there, it's a no, and we honoured that. But what we have done is we found a compromise that we have to match their restrictions. And so, all of the most residents pays for it, everyone understands it, most people don't like it, but if they didn't have it, then we would have absolute carnage in case, so we have to make a decision. And so I guess that's what this policy is looking for, those decisions still to be made. We didn't go on and say, we're going to give you a 365 day season anywhere in the override your feelings, but we found a way forward, and I can say that the match day restrictions is an extra burden on us to keep doing every match day, but we are trying to make sure that we all the residents commitment to that. And I do want to use that as an example. So I've always been told there is never any CPZ in Highgate, but they're all in Tottenham. Actually, Highgate does have a CPZ. And Tottenham, North Tottenham, around the Spurs Stadium, a lot of them don't. So that inequality is not there, and it's needed to be. But things might change in the review, people might now want it, and that's why we're going for 5-year reviews as well. So I hope that answers your question. It's just to make sure there is some leeway, because sometimes we have to use that in it, and we should be authority to make an appointment. What ways of doing that statutory responsibility.
So if we move to the resolution, which is to approve recommendations as set out by 4, we will agree. So really last time it was in the public part. Before we move on, I just want to say that we've got through a lot of decisions tonight, and I think it's important that we thank as we go along, but just to put on record and know the effort that goes into these as well, and the huge amount of work that has gone into medicals that we potentially do us, which will make a massive impact. So thank you to all the officers present here, but also those on screen and those who haven't joined us. If we can move to item 23, which is the minutes of the bodies, can we note that, please? Item 24, some delegated actions, can we know these significant actions? There are no items of urgent business, and we can move to item 6, which is the original topic. So we'll now consider items 27 and 28, which contain exempt information in relation to items 6 and 14. So can I move that the present public be excluded in the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information and to find out paragraphs 3 and 5 are on the schedule for available of the Local Act. So can I ask you to agree that? Really? We can now close the public portion of the meeting.